All right, our first exercise. You want to implement a custom button component. So here in the components folder, I'm going to add a file called button.js. Here we're going to create a function component called button. Now in this button, we want to have a container. That's where we're going to have that red background. And we're going to have a text component inside that container. So let's use a view as our container. This view should have a bunch of styles. So let's import the style sheet module on the top and then type rnss to create our styles. Here we're going to have the styles for our button. So I'm going to set the background color to, I'm going to use our primary color here. So we need to import our color palette on the top. This is another benefit of having all the colors in one file. So we import colors from, we go one level up, then we go to the config folder. And by the way, this is another benefit of implementing a component in a single file. So now we can go only one level up to get to the config folder. If this file was inside a folder called button, we had to go 2 levels up. I don't like that. So that's why I prefer to implement my components in a single file. So here in the config folder, we load the colors module. And then here we set background color to colors.primary. Now here we give it a border radius of 25. So our button has round corners. Now inside this button, we want our text to be horizontally and vertically in the center. So we set justify content to center and align items to center as well. We can give our button some padding, let's say 15. And I would like this button to stretch to fill its container. So we set the width to 100%. Now let's set style to styles.button. So here's our container. Inside this container, we're going to have a text component. Let's import text. Now here we want to render the title of this button. So I'm going to destructure this props argument. Let's say the consumer of this component is supposed to set the title prop. So we get that and render it over here. Now our text should also have a bunch of styles. So let's create them. Let's set the color to white, or we can define this in our color palette. So let's go to colors.js. And just like we set black to 000, we can also define white and set it to FFF. Now back to our button component. Here we set color to colors.white. Now let's set the font size to 18. I also like to apply a transformation here and make the text uppercase. And finally, let's make it bold. Good. So now let's apply these styles over here. Styles.text. Good. Now I just noticed that I used the name button here. This might clash with the button component in React Native. So let's rename this to app button. So we press F2 and rename this to app button. That's better. Let's also rename the file. So app button. Now let's use our new component. So we go to app.js. Inside our container, let's render app button and set its title to login. Here we can also use self-closing syntax because we're not going to put anything inside this component. Now let's give it a try. So here's our component. It looks decent, but currently it doesn't respond to tap events. So back to our component. Here we need to wrap this inside a touchable opacity component. So let's import touchable opacity. Save the changes. Now the width is no longer 100%. So what if we apply these styles on touchable opacity? Okay, our button looks good. Now we no longer need this view as a container, so we can treat this touchable opacity as the container. So let's remove the view, and we can also remove it from the top. Good. Now, here we're going to handle the onPress event and we want to be able to pass the handler from the outside. So we're going to use a prop called onPress, and we use that over here. Now, let's go to our app.js. And here, we set onPress to an inline function just to make sure that it works. We're going to do a console.log and say tapped. So let's test our component. Good. We have that visual feedback. Let's look at our terminal. So here's our tapped event. Beautiful. Now, let's also verify that our button looks good on Android. It looks perfectly fine to me. So we're done with this. Next, we're going to use this on our welcome screen.